not very many people know about the history of Mexicans in Kansas at all, or Topeka.
Topeka is the capital of Kansas. It's been the heart of Mexican migration for more than a century. In Topeka, the predominantly Mexican-American enclave of Oakland sits on the city's east side. The tracks of how it came to be are not hard to find. They literally circle the neighborhood.
During the time of the Mexican Revolution, livelihoods were at stake. Men and families, at first, they would employ a strategy of moving to bigger cities. Usually, migrants were met in Texas. Most often, El Paso was the kind of point of entry for the people who came to Kansas, and they were met there by railroad agents who were looking for workers. Topeka had what's known as a roundhouse, and the laborers came to work there, doing all sorts of unskilled jobs, and they settled right around where the what's known as the Santa Fe shops in Topeka. Right in that area, and that area now is called Oakland. So literally in the shadows of the place where they worked, and that's where Our Lady of Guadalupe Church is, right across the street from the Santa Fe shops.
Our Lady of Guadalupe carries a special significance.
I think that as Mexicanos that she's part of our identity.
Jenny Tavares' parents left Mexico during the Mexican Revolution.
Our Lady of Guadalupe was always I would say probably at home, was always a presence. In my mom's bedroom, she had a picture of her embossed on foil, different color foil with little paper flowers, and then it has a glass dome on it, and that was in her bedroom. And so that was the first probably image that I remember seeing of Our Lady of Guadalupe, and as a matter of fact, it's in my bedroom now.
Is it really?
Yeah, she gave it to me.
One of the reasons that there is an Our Lady of Guadalupe church in Oakland, why it all started, was because she was one of the unifying factors for all the different people who lived there in Oakland and Topeka, and I think that still holds true today, no matter what part of Mexico you're from or when you arrived in this country. Our Lady of Guadalupe, and in Topeka in particular, the church, is the center of the Mexican community, precisely because it is Our Lady of Guadalupe Church.
Graciela Berumen, a mother of two, travels 50 miles from St. George, Kansas to Topeka every Sunday.
This morning I attended the 11:30 Spanish Mass. That was important to me because I have two children and I want to continue our Catholic faith, first of all, but then second of all, our Spanish language, and then also, our devotion to Our Lady.
Although the specific push and pull factors for Mexican migration to Topeka have changed over time, the sense of community and familiarity found in Topeka remain the same.
I think Topeka is unique in that it had this huge influx of Mexican immigrants in the early 20th century because of the Santa Fe Railroad. And then, with the onset of the Depression and the decline in the availability of jobs nationwide and in Topeka as well, that migration from Mexico basically stopped. And for decades, that Topeka community was very insular. And it was not until, say, the late 80s and 90s where new Mexican immigrant populations started to come in. And I think that those immigrants came from Mexico. And now we have people of Mexican descent moving into Topeka from other parts of the United States. And I think that is because of Topeka's affordability. Places like California are very expensive.
We lived in Mexico for 3 years before moving here. And before that, we were all born in California. In my grandparents' home, there was always images of Our Lady. In fact, in the car, in the keychains. I mean, the image of Our Lady is pretty much everywhere in a Mexican home. So my first memories of the church are, I mean, as you walk in, it's beautiful. And then once you're in, just the people, they're very welcoming. I remember sitting in the pews and being invited to participate in the choir, even though we had just moved and we didn't really know anybody. So to me, from the beginning, it was a very welcoming community.
I think part of the reason that Mexican migrants stay in Topeka is because there is a community, a Mexican community that's already established here, and part of that is Our Lady of Guadalupe Church. And I think that finding those cultural markers in a town breeds familiarity and comfort. So there's an urban legend that says Mexicans preferred working for the Santa Fe Railroad because their logo was a cross. The jobs that brought Mexican migrants to Topeka in the early 20th century would be with the Santa Fe Railroad. So Our Lady of Guadalupe Church in Topeka began around 1921 in a storefront with about 20 family members from the Mexican community. The story goes that Our Lady of Guadalupe Church came about when a community member named Pedro Lopez was on his way to deliver a package to the railroad station in Topeka in 1914. And while he was there, he, by chance, saw a priest that he knew from Mexico. The priest was traveling through. And he convinced this priest to stay in Topeka because the Mexican community did not have anyone to minister to them. And so he did. This priest stayed in Topeka and started a church. And they named it Our Lady of Guadalupe. And the first church, I think, had about 20 families in it. And it gradually grew. And then by 1921, it was housed in a home. Upstairs was a school and downstairs was the church. And that was where the church was until the 1951 flood.
Cristina Valdivia Alcalá is conducting an oral history around this neighborhood. She is the director of the Tonantzin Society, a Topeka organization committed to Latino cultural heritage. Jenny Tavares remembers a new church being built in the late 1950s.
But I remember that when they were putting the mosaic, I'd be at my grandma's house right there on the corner of Lake and Atchison, and the trucks would go by with the little cut pieces of glass, and you could pick, and they would be falling from, you know, like gravel falls from a truck. Well, those little pieces of glass would fall from the trucks, and so you could go pick them up.
You are the first person that I've ever spoken to that has any memory or articulation of when that happened in '62. Do you remember the church without the mosaic?
Yeah.
Because the mosaic was done in 1962. That's the year I was born.
The big thing I remember is the trucks going by, and so a lot of people had little jars that had the little pieces of, it's like, I don't know if it's glass or marble, but you know, the darker blue, the lighter blue, the almost white, but because you just picked it up off the street because it'd fall off the trucks.
And so, the mosaic that comprises this Oakland neighborhood has many colorful pieces. The cultural contributions from Mexican migrants adds to the richness of this community. But people who move to Topeka from Mexico also receive a cultural education themselves. That includes learning the textbook version of Our Lady of Guadalupe.
I didn't really formally know the whole story until I started in my education career and I started learning more about our culture and our history.
So Our Lady of Guadalupe, she is known as the patron saint of Mexico, and this is because a Mexican peasant named Juan Diego was walking along the hills outside of what is now Mexico City, and he came across this beautiful woman, and she identified herself as Our Lady of Guadalupe. And she asked Juan Diego to tell the Archbishop in Mexico City that he needed to build her a cathedral in her honor. Juan Diego, being a dutiful, he was converted, he was Christianized man, went to the Archbishop and told him he saw this lady, Our Lady, and that she wanted him to build a cathedral. And the bishop was very skeptical, to say the least. And he said, I don't believe you, I want proof. And so Juan Diego went back and reported his conversation to her and said, the bishop doesn't believe you, he needs proof. So she put a bunch of roses that don't normally grow at that time of year into his cloak and told him to present this to the Archbishop. So Juan Diego went back carrying all the roses in his cloak, and when he got there, he said, this is the proof that she gave me these beautiful flowers. And so he opened up his cloak, the roses fell out, and on his cloak was an image of Our Lady of Guadalupe, and the bishop believed him.
The last couple of years that I've taught CCD, when it was, as we were nearing the feast day of Our Lady of Guadalupe, I made a point of, that we made tilmas, and I read them. I have a book of, a children's book telling the story of Our Lady of Guadalupe, because maybe it's that thing, is that I didn't want them to, I want these kids to know why they are devoted to Our Lady of Guadalupe. Because I know that a lot of them have them in their house, but do they know the story? And I'd ask them, have you heard the story of Our Lady of Guadalupe? No, really.
The indigenous nature of Our Lady of Guadalupe remains a mystery to many Oakland residents. However, the lessons that have survived the centuries are proudly passed down.
So Topeka's Mexican Fiesta began in 1933 as a fundraiser for Our Lady of Guadalupe Church. The church was unable to pay its electric bills, so some of the family members got together and thought a fiesta would be a good fundraising idea. So one night they had music, food, carnival games, and they were able to raise about $300 for the church. But the Mexican community had so much fun and they liked it so much that they wanted to do it again the next year. And they did. And then by the third year, it went from one night to 3 nights.
And I'm not assuming to know what the new immigrant population, thinks or feels, but yet when they come here, they have an established church and parish that is with their most beloved mother, right?
I'm glad that they're here, because I think that they've added a lot of vitality and different fiestas to the church, and that we didn't know of.
Funny story, before I even moved to Manhattan, I looked through the phone book, I called, I saw what church offered Mass in Spanish, because for me the language component is very important because that's what I grew up with. And with that, I mean, I don't think you could go to a Spanish Mass that did not celebrate the Feast of Our Lady, honestly.
I agree.
So like I say, she's always in the background,
I
always.
agree.
And we started going there before I even moved. So when I got there, we already had established a community, we already had established a support group.
I haven't always lived in Topeka, but anytime like I'm moving somewhere or thinking about moving to a city, if I want to know if there's any sort of Mexican population in the city, I will look and see if there's an Our Lady of Guadalupe church, right? I think one of the things that makes Topeka's Mexican community unique is its closeness. And one of the things that makes that happen is Our Lady of Guadalupe Church.